And welcome to the final edition of College Road Trip for this season. I did say final, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But along with Ryan Thies, I'm Barry Nelson here to bring you all the college basketball and college sports news that you're going to want to know about today. We're going to break down the NCAA Tournament and talk about the NCAA Championship game. We are also going to be joined by Christian Heimall one last time here to discuss everything that happened on Monday and what we can look for in the future. Talk about some of today's headlines, a couple of big stories coming out in the last couple of days, so we want to get some perspective on that. And then we will make our big announcement, telling you what's happening with College Road Trip and where we may possibly land. So just want to get that out there. Make sure you stay tuned. If you have a comment, if you want to talk to us on Facebook, by all means, we are on Facebook Live. Comment below, and we will try and get your comments on with us. And if you have a question for Christian, by all means, ask those questions. But Ryan, national championship game, we're winners.
Yeah, it was
we win.
Host versus the panel, I guess. We were the only two to pick North Carolina out of the 5 people we had, and we kind of split on the score, too.
We did. The score was 71-65. You predicted 76-68. I predicted 77-74. So they won by 6. You predicted 8. I predicted 3. We're just going to go straight down the middle and say, hey, we nailed it. Yeah. You know, we're just going to split it right down the middle.
We're a team here.
Exactly.
It's a team game.
And speaking of teams, Ryan, you predicted a loss on a 3-point shot. I predicted that they would be up, that North Carolina would be up 4 shooting free throws with 6 seconds left. They were up 5 shooting free throws with 7.2 seconds left. I don't know if I can get any more, bold than that, closer than that. And then Gonzaga missed a 3-pointer that would have cut it to a 1-point lead. So in essence, we both kind of hit on those points too. So I'm pretty proud of ourselves. We were talking about how we revert to the experts, so to speak, but realistically, we made ourselves
maybe we're the experts.
Maybe we are. We made ourselves
turn
look
into
pretty
the
good.
right show.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to know if you want to get some bracket information for next year. Yeah, probably not the best show to turn into. But if you want national championship predictions, we're there for you.
We're at a game-by-game basis.
Yeah, exactly.
We limit 1.
Yeah, limit 1 per. So we're good for 1. But we do want to bring in Christian Heimall one last time. Christian is our NCAA basketball insider. He is the play-by-play man for the Manhattan Jaspers. And Christian, it was a national championship game, but I can't say that it was too pretty of a national championship game.
The final 20 minutes especially weren't that pretty. The first 20, I love the first half. I was watching right before halftime, and all I could think was, man, this is going to be one of those classic games. It's going to go right down to the wire, similar to how last year did with Villanova in North Carolina. But as soon as the second half started, literally as soon as the second half started with those 2 turnovers by Gonzaga, you knew it was going to be a little bit different. And there was a stretch there from, I think, about the 13-minute mark to the 7-minute mark where there was just no flow, there was no rhythm whatsoever, and that had a lot to do, unfortunately, with the officiating. What was amazing was how quick and how often those whistles came in that portion of the second half. And then really the final 3-4 minutes, they kind of swallowed their whistles and let the kids play when you really would have liked to have seen them do that throughout.
Yeah, and there was one instance where they did swallow their whistle, and we're going to take a look at that here real briefly before we take a look at it, though. A lot of controversy in the last few minutes of the game. There was a scrum out of bounds, as we see right here. Kennedy Meeks, and I fail to remember who the Gonzaga player was, but it was Kennedy Meeks, and I believe it was Perkins. But they were both, or no, it was Matthews. They were both going out of bounds. And Kennedy Meeks actually had his hand out of bounds while he was holding the ball, and there was no call by the referee. If we're going to see it right here once again. Right there, Kennedy Meeks is out of bounds. He's got the ball in between his legs, almost has his left hand on the ball and his right hand out of bounds. No call. What do you make of that, Christian?
It's so difficult and unfortunate that this happened. There are so many times you can sit there and replay it and wonder how the official who is standing right there doesn't see that.
You can see him in the shot.
Exactly. You can see him and you can wonder how this guy doesn't make that call. But when push comes to shove, unfortunately, the call isn't made, and Mark Few, I thought, handled it brilliantly after the game, all class, just saying, that's how things go sometimes. I think at that point, the official is more looking at the ball to determine if there's a tie-up, if there's going to be a change of possession, as opposed to who is out of bounds and who's not. So, listen, I'm not going to be an apologist for the officials. I thought they definitely had a hand in how the game played. I don't think they had a hand in how the game ended up, obviously. The kids put up the scores. I think the officials just had a way of adjusting the flow and the rhythm of the game. But that particular play, I think the official is looking more so at who's got possession of the ball rather than where everybody's arms and legs are all flying around and seeing who's stepping out of bounds or who's potentially on the line in those moments. But either way, I mean, like I said, it's a heartbreaker. It's a tough one. A lot of Gonzaga fans are going to think about that for years to come. It's going to be the Reggie Bush push for a lot of people in Northwest Washington for a lot of years.
Yeah, it's very disappointing for Gonzaga to make it all the way there and not win, but they still had a historic run. First time they've gotten that far. There's a lot of alumni in the stands, like Adam Morrison and John Stockton. Still a great moment here for Gonzaga. Are they really going to be that disappointed down the line, maybe next season? I know immediately they feel kind of upset and feel like one was stolen from them, but still, you got to pat yourself on the back a little bit for being the first Gonzaga team to make it this far and this close to hanging up a national championship banner.
Yeah, anytime a team does something for the first time ever, you've got to feel pretty good about it. Your first ever trip to the Final Four, your first ever trip to the national championship game. Obviously, they would have loved to have capped it off with their first ever championship. But I think what they'll eventually look back, those seniors and the guys who eventually do leave that program, they'll sit there and go, you know what, we were the first. We were the first guys to do it, and now they can pass that along to everybody else. And what this does more than anything else, and the reason why they shouldn't be disappointed or down about themselves, is the fact that there are going to be so many more kids that sit there now and go, I want to be the first ever to bring Gonzaga a national championship. Because now what you look at is you look in the lore of Gonzaga basketball. A lot of people think of John Stockton first and foremost. But now you're going to think about Karnowski and Collins and Matthews and Nigel Williams-Goss and Williams and say those guys brought us on the precipice to our first ever national championship. And now some other kid is going to sit there and go, you know what? I want to surpass those guys and bring them their first ever title.
Boy, did Adam Morrison look different.
God.
And I'm trolling, I'm trolling Twitter here, and I just wanted to take a look at some of these tweets. It says, Adam Morrison looks like a narc pretending to be high school age. He had the slick back hair. He didn't really have the mustache anymore, but he was in a Gonzaga, looked like practice jersey, tank top type of thing. What was it? He had 9 rebounds, 9 points. He finally had 9 points, but he was only 1 of 8 shooting, missing everything. What it seemed like from inside the paint. And then you had Kennedy Meeks, who ended up with 7 points and 10 rebounds. Kind of lackluster from both of them, especially since we were looking so forward to that matchup.
Well, a lot of it also has to do with what they did against each other defensively. I mean, you look at that first half, how many times did Karnowski struggle to get his patented move into the paint and get that shot to fall? That's because he's never faced a guy as physical as Kennedy Meeks. And Kennedy, the same breath, he's taken a lot of those 10-foot jumpers that he's not used to taking because he knows he can't get in there and bully Karnowski down. So, yeah, the two look sloppy, but also give the two a lot of credit for how well they played defensively against each other. I mean, I thought that they played great defense against one another. I thought the biggest key realistically for North Carolina, number one, was that they forced 14 turnovers. And that was a huge key as opposed to only coughing it up 4 times. And then the only reason Gonzaga was really still in there is I believe Justin Jackson was something like 0 of 8 from 3 until he hit his first one with about 4 minutes left. So, that's kind of how it works. You live and die by the 3, and then the team that makes the fewest mistakes wins. And North Carolina did. They made 10 fewer mistakes than Gonzaga.
One of the other matchups we were looking at was the Joel Berry versus Nigel Williams-Goss. Now, Berry seemed to get the better of Goss, but Goss really had a good all-around game. I mean, those two were really going at each other. And Joel Berry, you got to give him all the credit in the world for having the ankle and foot injuries. He really produced and really put this team on his shoulders and said, "Hey, we're going to win the national championship."
Listen, I love Nigel Williams-Goss. The kid has been so much fun to watch all season long for Gonzaga, and you kind of hope that he'll be able to play at that next level. And he's got the ability, and he's got the size. That's the most important thing. When you look at guards, especially from a, quote, mid-major conference like the WCC, you don't think they have the size to compete at the next level, but he does. He's got an interesting skill set and an interesting size. I would love to see him up at the NBA, and you kind of almost wonder what would happen if he didn't tweak that ankle again late in that second half, and just see how much he was able to do. Both of them, though, he and Joel Berry, they're the head of the snake for both those offenses, and I thought the two kind of canceled each other out, but at the same time, they also provided some really entertaining basketball throughout the entire season.
No, I think both these teams kind of have some positives to take away. Gonzaga making to the national title game, North Carolina finally getting their revenge that they wanted against Villanova. But what are some of these things that they can take away from here moving forward into next year?
Well, for North Carolina, you can take the fact that it's you did it. You set out the goal that you wanted to after a year ago absolute heartbreak, and you're able to complete that goal, which is huge. And you did it with a lot of veteran leadership, and now there's a group of kids that are going to come back. I mean, you're obviously going to lose Meeks and lose Bradley. I mean, you're probably going to lose Justin Jackson, but there's still some talent left there. It's Roy Williams, and I think Roy kind of proved that he can still coach. One of the biggest things that I've heard from a lot of Tar Heel fans, their biggest frustrations is that sometimes Roy forgets, how to coach effectively in the second half, and he didn't here at all this tournament. I mean, you look at that ACC semifinal with Duke. He had an 18-point lead in the second half and lost. So a lot of that can be attributed to, you don't want to say failures, but maybe getting out-coached a little bit. And not once this entire tournament was he out-coached. He went and he did what Hall of Fame guys do on the sidelines, and that's win a championship. Meanwhile, for Gonzaga, you can sit there and say, listen, we did this. We got this far, and we're going to bring almost everybody back next year. I mean, Nigel Williams-Goss is only a junior. The question is if he goes to the NBA, or if a guy like Collins makes that next step. At 7 feet tall and shooting 48% from beyond the arc, he is a perfect fit in the NBA. But if everybody comes back, obviously except for the graduating seniors, this is a very talented Gonzaga team, and one that I wouldn't be surprised at all if they've got a number one seed again next year.
You look at we saw what we learned from each team. Who is the team of the tournament besides North Carolina and Gonzaga? Who do you think really stood out? Was it that South Carolina team? Was it an Oregon that is just on the precipice, maybe just getting to that point? Is it a Kentucky that's going to be one and done, but in the preseason polls already for next year is rated number one in many of them? Who do you look at as maybe, if we take a look at some of the early preseason rankings, really it's too early to tell, but you take a look at some of these around, and even Seth Davis from Sports Illustrated has his rankings out. He has Arizona and Kentucky as number 1, 2, Louisville in the top 3 as well. You got 10-1 shots with Louisville, Duke, and Kentucky in the NCAA tournament, winning the NCAA championship next year. Who do you see as next year's favorite?
Listen, I mean, it's hard to argue with Louisville. They bring literally everybody back except for graduating Mango Matthew. I think Donovan Mitchell declared for the NBA draft, but they bring back almost every single piece of that team, which was very, very talented. They just ran into a hot squad in Michigan during the tournament. I thought they presented the biggest threat to Kansas if they were able to get that far. Now those two never matched up, obviously, but still a very talented squad. Rick Pitino is a great coach. I think Arizona is a very, very good team to look at. It's hard to argue against John Calipari. I mean, it really is, considering how well he recruits and the fact that he doesn't recruit great college players. He recruits NBA talent, and it's hard to compete against a squad of NBA players at the collegiate level. So it's very tough to say. I think that those three are up there towards the tops. I mean, when you look back at this tournament, you're gonna think of two teams, truthfully, which is unfortunate for North Carolina because they're gonna be remembered as the champion. That's about it. It's gonna be about how Gonzaga made their first ever national championship game after 20 years, realistically, of being the Cinderella, being the bridesmaid to all these other big schools. And then you're gonna remember South Carolina and how they basically put the world on notice, saying we're not just a football school. The SEC saying we're not just a football conference. And what Frank Martin has done is incredible. I love that team. It pains me that Sindarius Thornwell is not going to get to play another year because I think he would be so much fun to watch after having the taste of success he did this year. But that being said, nobody jumped further up the NBA draft charts than Thornwell during this tournament. So he's going to have a pretty solid career post-college. But, yeah, I mean, looking at next year, I love these way too early bracketologies. They're so much fun. But I do think those top three, Kentucky, Louisville, Arizona, throw them in a bag, jumble them up. Who knows how it's all going to pan out in the next 6-7 months when we finally get those preseason rankings. But all I do know is that you can't be upset with how this tournament shook out, and you can't really be too excited for what next year has in store for us.
Well, and it's interesting to see that even Wichita State is managing to crack the top 10 for preseason next year. A lot of people very high on Wichita State. They were 31-5 and pushed Kentucky to the brink without any seniors. So they got all of their players coming back, too. You look at smaller teams like a Wichita State or maybe a Gonzaga coming back. Who do you think is going to be kind of the dark horse, maybe the mid-major type team that's going to be in the top 10 pretty much all year long?
Listen, it's going to be one of those two. I think St. Mary's may have an outside shot just because they do bring back a lot of talent. And without Karnowski for Gonzaga, it's going to be a little bit tough to replace his presence inside, but not his leadership, because you do have Nigel. It all depends on who comes back from these teams. You got to remember that. I mean, these guys can declare at any moment, and a player like Nigel Williams-Goss may be able to jump into the draft and all of a sudden turn things around for him. So who knows? But I do think those two teams are definitely some of the better ones to watch out for from a mid-major standpoint. And then just watch it. I mean, listen, it's tough. I'm just going to throw it out there. They're 100% healthy, hopefully, come November. They were a team that should have been seeded higher this year. Rhode Island is going to be that mid-major squad, that Cinderella team to watch the entire year long.
Now, to talk about Wichita State a little bit, there's some rumors going around that they're trying to join the American Athletic Conference, leave the Missouri Valley, where they've kind of had, not really disrespected, but it was devalued as far as the Missouri Valley Conference went, because they didn't really play anyone, and that conference wasn't as strong. So what do you make of Wichita State making a push to join the American starting next season?
Listen, I hate conference shifts. I really do. I never liked the idea. When we lost Big East, the true Big East, we lost a lot of great college basketball rivalries. And listen, one of the schools and one of the conferences that I love the most is the biggest culprit of it in the ACC. When you lose Louisville, when you all of a sudden Maryland is playing conference games against Ohio State instead of Duke, North Carolina every single year, that's not college basketball. But I've never been a big fan of these changes. I think it obviously is a huge money grab, but it used to be for those big schools, those Power 5 schools, it used to be all about football, and that was what really broke apart the Big East, was that the football schools wanted to leave, or they wanted to force those other schools to get football, and it's a very costly sport. So for Wichita State, I mean, you can go up into the American. I don't think it's that big of a jump, and that's just because the American Conference is made up of all those teams that just wanted out of the Big East. So, I mean, who really – Southern Methodist, are they really going to be one of those top teams every single year? Is UConn going to ever get back to the UConn of the Big East? It's a tough league to really kind of gauge and see how talented they're going to be year in and year out. But I would just love to see them continue. I mean, until Gonzaga goes to the Pac-12, what's really the point? I mean, be the great mid-major, be that team that runs through your conference. You know you're always going to get that automatic bid, or God forbid you lose, you're going to be talented enough with some non-conference wins to get an at-large bid. So continue where you are, keep dominating, keep doing what you're doing, and then if that chance opens up for you to really make a jump, maybe the Big 10, maybe the Big 12, then go for it. But there's really no point to sit in. It's not a big enough leap to justify going from the Missouri Valley to the American, at least not at this stage.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. If Wichita State is going to make a jump, why not make it to the Big 12? That's where, or even the Big 10, like you said. But I see the Big 12 as being more realistic with the Texas and, Texas Tech, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, all those state schools near them. Like a Kansas and a Kansas State, and you take a look at some of these other schools, and it's just, it would make sense.
Well, I think the Big 12 more wants a football school. Wichita State does not have football. There's rumors.
Listen. They've got Kansas football. They don't want a football school.
Even though they have KU, they still want football there. But I think that's the reason why they didn't look at the Big 12.
And the other part is
taking a look at. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. Listen, Bill Self doesn't want to play Wichita State ever in the non-conference. So if you're really going to upset one of your premier and marquee coaches and marquee programs by bringing Wichita State into the conference, I mean, listen, I agree with you. I think the Big 12 is probably the right move for them. That chance isn't going to open up though because they aren't a football team. As strange and as stupid as that may sound.
Well, taking a little bit more of a leap to next year, I want to take a look at some of these guys that have declared early for the draft. Malik Monk, Bam Adebayo have declared, although Adebayo said he's not going to get an agent. Caleb Swanigan also said he's not going to get an agent. De'Aaron Fox, obviously, we talked about earlier this week. Going into the draft, you have so many of these young guys, Lonzo Ball. Markelle Fultz coming into the draft. Who do you see as really the overall number one pick? Is it still Markelle Fultz? Is it Lonzo Ball? Is it De'Aaron Fox now? I mean, and a lot of people are predicting that Justin Jackson is going to come out too, but he's not declared yet. So who do you see as maybe these top 2 or 3 guys?
Well, and this is the annoying part about the NBA is until the lottery picks are decided, you don't really know who is going to be. We can all say Boston's going to have the number 1 pick, but until it becomes official, we don't know. If the Celtics do have the number 1 overall pick, my biggest thing for them is they need rebounding and they need outside shooting. So a guy like Lonzo Ball or Markelle Fultz isn't going to help when you've already got Isaiah Thomas and Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart. A great addition for them would be Josh or Justin Jackson out of Kansas, or if Justin declares out of North Carolina. That being said, some of the other teams that are down there and in the mix, Orlando is in dire need of some talented guard play, and Lonzo and Markelle are 2 of the better ones. The only reason why I kind of like Lonzo a little bit better is he's 2 inches taller, and you can make of it what you will, but what do point guards do nowadays? Point guards go in and they grab rebounds. What does Russell Westbrook and James Harden do every single night? They grab the rebound, they run down the floor, they score. They grab the rebound, they run down the floor, pass it off for an assist. That's what the NBA execs are looking for out of their point guard now. They're not looking for your John Stockton type anymore or your Rajon Rondo who can't shoot from outside 6 feet. They're looking for these guys who can hit the outside shot, who can grab the ball and run in transition, go coast to coast. And I think Lonzo, just because of his size, is a little bit better at that. Markel's got a much better outside shot, obviously. So it really is kind of based off who do you want. Those 3 guys are going to be probably the top 3 picks. The question is to who? And I still think if the Celtics end up with the number 1 pick, their biggest hole is rebounding and outside shooting, and they don't really need another point guard. So a guy like Josh Jackson is absolutely perfect for them. He's one I've been advocating for the entire season as the number 1 overall pick for the Celtics. And if the ping pong balls fall their way, I think Brad Stevens could be coaching Josh Jackson.
Well, and one of the guys that's really interesting to me, he's only a junior, but I'm wondering if he's going to come out, and that's Grayson Allen. He has got such a horrible reputation for tripping and for being a dirty player. Does he come out this year, or does he stay at Duke and try and get his reputation back a little bit?
Well, if he comes out, he's definitely a potential late first-round pick, possibly to Golden State, and he can learn how to do it more discreetly from Draymond. But I do think I think more he'll stay. I don't think he has the caliber to be that NBA talent just yet. I think one more year for him. What do most Duke guys do? It's rare that you see a Duke player leave early unless they are a tremendous talent. And I think Grayson, one more year of maturity, of maturing in the collegiate game, and a chance to take Duke a little bit further than where they were this year. I think that's what he ultimately wants. Guys go to Duke to win college games. They don't go to Duke to play in the NBA. Very few guys do that just because of how talented a school and the type of coach Mike Krzyzewski is. So I think he stays one more year. If he does come out, though, he'll be an interesting – I don't know if he really makes the first round, but he'll be an interesting guy to kind of watch on draft day.
I was interested to see some of these names that I'm looking on. I'm looking on DraftSite.com. It's a mock draft for NBA drafts, and they have some projections as to who might be coming out. Nigel Williams-Goss they have coming out. They have Grayson Allen coming out and being picked the first pick of the second round. They actually have Ethan Happ from Wisconsin coming out, and I don't see that happening, but it's interesting because they have him going to the Milwaukee Bucks, but that's not going to happen. Taco Fall, he just declared yesterday, I believe it was, 7'6" center from Central Florida. Do you see him being an NBA player, or is he just one of those kind of novelty acts that's really, really big and he's gonna be on your team to sell tickets, or is he gonna be like a guy like Sean Bradley, who was kind of a joke when he came into the league and then actually developed into a pretty decent, off the bench player?
The biggest thing with these guys, especially at a school like Central Florida, is they're playing at Central Florida for a reason. There's something wrong with their game that doesn't have them at one of those elite schools. At 7'6", it's very hard to have great footwork. And that's the biggest thing when you're looking for a big guy. And remember what the NBA is nowadays. There are very few true big men that just hang out down low and don't do anything. Serge Ibaka, Blake Griffin come to mind, Tim Duncan before he retired. But now it's all about, can you step outside? Can you shoot that 15-footer? Can you get a three? Can you handle the basketball at all? And those are kind of the big reasons why a guy like Fall isn't going to be that high on too many draft boards. Yeah, his size is great, but until he's able to really kind of put together the footwork and become a little bit more of a two-way player, and add a couple more tools to him, he's not going to be that high up, and I don't really see him translating that well up to the NBA. I mean, think about it. There's a guy who got signed by the Cavs who I thought, and I watched him play a couple of years in college, I thought this kid could do a lot of things. And Larry Sanders at VCU, I thought he was a tremendous talent and one of those guys who could play at the next level, and he's been sitting around doing nothing for 2 years until the Cavs needed him, and now he's playing for Cleveland, but again, I think he was 6'11", and just a tremendous inside presence. But it's rare that you see those true big men now in the NBA. They got to be able to step outside. They got to have a mid-range or a deep shot in their arsenal.
Christian, it's been a pleasure, as always, all season long. You've been with us all tournament long. It's been great. We appreciate your insight. We love having you on, and we hope that we can have you on come college football time. And again, as college basketball season rolls around next year.
Guys, it'll be my pleasure. And I just want to give one quick note. A big thank you to St. Anthony's School in New Jersey. They are unfortunately going to be shutting down at the end of the school year in June. The great Bob Hurley Sr., tremendous high school coach, one of the most dominant high school programs. Because of funding, unfortunately, not only is the team folding, the school is closing its doors. 160 kids going to have to figure out where they're going to continue their high school education. But the Hurley family is basketball royalty. They really are. And it all starts with the patriarch and Bob, who was a tremendous high school coach and an absolute legend in the game. And he's going to be missed, and that school is going to be severely missed on the high school front.
Yep, and we are going to be talking about that later on in the show, so thank you very much for that, Christian. We appreciate it, and like I said, we appreciate what you've done for us all tournament long.
Guys, take care. Have a good one.
All right, have a good one. That was Christian Heimall from Manhattan Jaspers, our play-by-play man. He is our NCAA insider, and always love having him on. He's got so much to say, so much insight, and a lot of it which we didn't fail. We failed to kind of throw it back in his face that he lost the prediction in the NCAA championship game. But that's a moot point.
Because we're nice people.
Exactly. That's a moot point, and he's just got some great insight on what's going on because he's there. He does it all, and he provides us
literally in the front row.
Yeah.
For the college basketball scene.
Division I college basketball.
Not the biggest scene, but he's still there, and he's been a great correspondent here for us in this inaugural season of Brew Sports.
Absolutely, and we love having him. And there are a few things that have come up over the course of the last couple days. One of them was a story coming out of the national championship game. There was a reporter that asked Roy Williams on Friday, if you win the national championship game, will you visit the White House? And in these turbulent times, with Donald Trump being who he is, a lot of people are wondering, do you have a relationship with him, and are you going to go visit him? And he said, well, I guess. And that's what he said on Friday. He was kind of non-committal about it, and then he said, then the reporter came back and asked him on Monday night, he said, you said, I guess, on Friday that you'd give an honest answer on Monday about going to the White House and to see President Trump if you won. Now that you're here, I'm curious, you can't jinx yourself, so what are your thoughts on that? And Coach Roy Williams said, I haven't had any. I probably screwed up. I should have told you to let me think about it afterwards because I wasn't going to jinx myself. He said they won in 2005 and never got invited, so Obama never invited them. He said, I don't know if we're going to get invited this time. That's a bad way of putting it. They invited us in September when they were doing a lot of teams well. All my team were already at NBA training camp and 2 of them in Europe, so we didn't go in 2005, and we did go in 2009. But and I messed up. It wasn't Obama in 2005. It was George Bush in 2005. I apologize, being the civics teacher that I am. But the office of the presidency of the United States is the most fantastic place you can be, but let me think on it. Again, I don't know that we're going to get invited. I really don't, but I know one thing. We're putting up a nice banner in the Smith Center, and that's hard to get. If you're Roy Williams and you have the opportunity to go to the White House, do you go?
I mean...
And put your own political beliefs aside, in this turbulent time.
If you take it for what it is, you won a championship, you get invited to the White House. It is a special thing to do because not many people get invited in that situation. It's kind of something that you get to do when you win a championship, whether it's Donald Trump in the White House or Ronald McDonald. You still get invited.
Or Jimmy Carter.
To go, yeah. But it's just... It's putting politics into sports. Some people don't like that. It's just how the 2017 sports year is going to go. And I think these questions are going to be asked after every championship game. They were asked during the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. Don't know how the Patriots are going to do that. It's going to be asked after the World Series, after the NBA Finals, after the Stanley Cup. It's all going to be asked, so it's just kind of it's new ground that we're going to see what happens and what they decide and who's going to be. People are going to be up in arms either way you go. Everyone's going to be a critic, and it's just a tough situation. Once again, putting politics into sports.
Well, and it all depends when they're gonna schedule for it, because now the Patriots aren't even going to go until April 19th, which is a week and a half from now. It's going to be on a Wednesday, I think. Actually, I think it's 2 weeks from today, isn't it? No, it's not. Yeah, it is 2 weeks from today. Can't do math, don't know civics, man. I need to go back to high school instead of teaching it. But yeah, 2 weeks from today is when the Patriots are going to go. So if they're not going till about 4 months after, well, you figure it's going to be April, May, June, maybe July that they get asked. Well, all these guys are going to be drafted already. All these guys, like in 2005, are going to have other plans, so it's going to be tough to get those people. It's going to be tough to get those players there. Why not do it now? Why not do it maybe in May when school is still in session and these guys, even though some of them have declared for the draft, can still have the opportunity to go. And they go as one big group. They don't have to travel from all over the country. They don't have to travel from Europe. They can come in and they can travel maybe even on the team's charter and just go up to Washington, D.C., just have a nice little ceremony and do it.
Yeah, but what I hope is that this doesn't become a recurring thing.
Oh, yeah.
That we, 'cause honestly, I didn't know that North Carolina didn't go in 2005. I didn't know that was a thing, and I'm glad I didn't know that because that doesn't really have to do with what North Carolina did in 2005. They won the national championship, and they are very deserving, and they should get the recognition for that. I don't want to be sitting here 6 months from now with stories still coming out like, can't believe what North Carolina did in the White House, or they didn't go in the White House, or they only brought a certain number of people. Just these other students were taking a stand. I don't want this to be about visiting the White House. It's still this 2016-17 NCAA basketball season has to do with North Carolina beating Gonzaga in the championship.
Right. Absolutely. Another story that we broke, we didn't necessarily break. I wish we would have broke this, but that was broken while right before we went on the air on Monday. Was Patrick Ewing being named the Georgetown head coach. Now there have been a couple of stories now coming out the last day or two. Patrick Ewing Jr. was actually on John Thompson III's staff. And now the athletic department is saying Patrick Ewing Jr. will not be able to work with his father because they deem that nepotism, and they have a rule against that at Georgetown. And they said John Thompson III never actually worked under his dad, John Thompson Jr., back in the late 80s and early 90s. They actually had him report directly to the athletic director. Now they're saying Patrick Ewing Jr. would be reporting directly to his father, so that they deem that as nepotism. Do you think that's fair? Do you think Patrick Ewing should be able to find his own staff and be able to work with who he wants to work with, even if it is his son?
I mean, if he sees that his son is fit for the job and can make the team the best it can be, then yeah, sure, definitely.
And I just think, if you're named a coach, you should have some say in who your staff is, even if it is, some people are going to say, yeah, it's nepotism, but hey, maybe he wants somebody familiar around him. Maybe he wants a family member around him that's going to give him that comfort level, that's going to provide him a little bit of comfort over the next couple of years when he actually has to make those tough decisions. He's got somebody to bounce it off of. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens after all is said and done. But I'm wondering how much John Thompson, the elder John Thompson, had a hand in this hiring, because we know, coaching from 1972 to 1999, John Thompson had a long-standing relationship with the University of Georgetown University, and he still does. So you wonder how much John Thompson was actually in the ear of the athletic department saying, hey, you got to hire Patrick Ewing.
Not just him, but other alumni and boosters wanting the star power and wanting Ewing, who kind of showed that he wanted the head coaching job for a while now at his alma mater, and it kind of a feel-good thing for the people of Georgetown. Letting, Patrick Ewing's back. He's going to get the winning ways back. But it just, for everyone outside of Georgetown, they're kind of pumping the brakes and saying, I don't know if this is the best hire. And I know it's a fun hire. It's something that you can relate to. Kind of the younger generation they know, Patrick Ewing, I've heard him before. This is kind of cool to have him back. We got a star here. But I'm just very curious to see if it's going to work out. It worked out for Grand Canyon University with Dan Marley. He obviously didn't go to Grand Canyon, but he was a Phoenix sports star.
Right.
And he never coached at the college level. He wanted to get the head coaching job for the Suns. Never could do that. So he took the head coaching job at Grand Canyon right there in Phoenix too. And they've won. They've had the best record in the WAC so far. There's first 3 or 4 seasons that they've been able to be in the WAC. Mm-hmm. They weren't postseason eligible, so that's why you haven't seen them in the tournament. But
they should be in 2 years, though, right?
I think
actually after next year.
Next year, yes. And they are a really, really good team. They've got a huge fan base, so that's turned out successful for them. So we'll see if kind of the same principle can happen over at Georgetown.
And they have those wonderful commercials, Grand Canyon
yeah,
University.
Everywhere.
I always thought that was kind of a fake commercial the way they promoted that, but man, that looks like a beautiful campus.
See, I always thought that was only in Phoenix. It's a great
University
campus.
of Phoenix.
I almost went to Grand Canyon. That was kind of my backup. Ended up going to Kansas Wesleyan, but had a lot of friends who go to Grand Canyon, and they love it.
Nice. Georgetown was 5-13 in conference last year in the Big East, second only to DePaul, who was 2-16. They were 14-18. Does he turn it around? Can he get this team to 500 in the middle of the pack in the Big East in his first year?
No,
not
in the first
Why
year.
Not?
Too quick. From where he was at, from what the program was at that point. And the Big East, they weren't the Big East that they were, but it's still the Big East.
Well, you still got Villanova, Butler, and Creighton.
Villanova, Butler, Creighton, a very young Marquette team that is still coming up. Xavier had a great postseason without some injuries. They could be in the Final Four.
Absolutely.
So it's just way too jam-packed for Georgetown to get back even to the middle of the pack. They'll be better than last year. They'll be better than DePaul. A lot of people.
I think my high school team is better than DePaul.
Than DePaul, but still.
Sorry, Blue Demon fans.
He does have the tools here at Georgetown to turn it around, but not next year, not immediately. Not that fast.
And I think he's going to be given that long leash, like we said on Monday.
Yeah,
he's
he
going to
has
be given
to.
that leash to stay there 4, 5, 6 years to just be able to cultivate, recruit, and
say
get his own people in there.
3 years, and he'll get into the conversation with what Villanova, Butler, and Creighton are right now.
Well, and we talked about on Monday some epic stuff of the women's game. UConn's 111-game winning streak was snapped. We talked about Mississippi State and South Carolina in that national championship. The question is, going into next season, will UConn go on another epic run? How long will their win streak be this time? They've had win streaks in the last 17 years of 70 games, 90 games, and 111 games. They've had 3 win streaks that average 90 games. That's just unbelievable.
In the last 17 years, they've only had 3 win streaks.
Yeah.
In 17 years.
3 win streaks. 3 win streaks. And they've lost back-to-back games.
Yeah.
They haven't lost back-to-back games in 25 years.
Yeah.
Will they go on another streak?
Oh, yeah. Easy,
you
for
think
sure.
so?
I'd say put it in the 70-80 range. Not going triple digits.
Well, and they got almost everybody back from this year or next year as they did this year. I mean,
it's easier for women's college.
Yeah,
basketball. You don't get any one and tons.
Yeah, you don't have anybody declaring early for the WNBA draft, even though some of them probably could. It's just amazing the talent that Gino Auriemma gets, and being a girls varsity basketball coach on the high school level, all these girls would talk about would be, if I had my dream, I'd go to UConn. I go to UConn. I go to UConn. That's what every girl's dream is that plays high school basketball is. If I were good enough, if I wanted to play college basketball, I'd want to play for Gino Auriemma and UConn because they want to win.
And I think that's great for the game. It gives them a dream and gives them a goal, maybe unrealistic or realistic, depending on the situation, but it gives them a dream and it gives them a little bit of a drive in high school. Without UConn, could you see a women's college player, or girls in your case in high school, just saying, I want to go to Baylor. You see a lot of local schools. Here in Wisconsin, we have Wisconsin Green Bay, UWGB, who's in the top 25 in the women's side. They're consistent. And, Todd Kowalczyk, is it Kowalczyk? I believe it's you don't know. I don't know.
I'm going to have to check on that. It was the boys' basketball coach was Todd Kowalczyk.
But anyway, but
it gives them something to look forward to. Absolutely,
and it's kind of the dream. It's like the young kid dreaming to be win the World Series in the bottom of the ninth. How many people is that going to happen to? Hardly anyone. Mm-hmm. But they still have that dream. It gives them that drive to play baseball and love the game. And so that I think it's attracting more girls to play basketball with that dream to be on the stage that UConn is right now. They're getting ESPN time slots here in the regular season, which is something they really haven't ever had before. They have Sports Center sets going to their games now, and that gives it a lot more exposure than it never had before.
Yeah, and I just love the fact that the women's game is actually getting some pub. They were talking about how the women's game was, especially the national championship was really, they had to find venues that would look full because they wouldn't get a full house. Now all of a sudden they're in Dallas and they're selling out 33,000 seat arenas, and that's the one thing when my wife and I were watching the Final Four, she's like, "Is that place full?" I said, yeah, it's full. I mean, you have a legitimate fan base in women's college basketball, and it's thanks to teams like UConn that even if they do dominate, they're still providing a lot of excitement for women's basketball.
Yeah, so it's just great. It's fun to watch. It drove me to watch the Final Four game on that
drove
Friday
the Twitterverse to watch the the UConn game too. As soon as they found out they were down by 9, I quick flipped over, and everybody that I know. Yeah, exactly. One thing that one final story we want to get to before we close out the show is something that Christian mentioned. St. Anthony's High School in Jersey City, New Jersey. If you guys have ever seen a documentary called "Where the Streets," My head's
The
not even
documentary about this.
It's a documentary about St. Anthony. St. Anthony's is one of these high schools. It's a private Catholic high school in Jersey City, New Jersey that has always been had to be funded through fundraising. And the legendary high school basketball coach Bobby Hurley from Duke, his father, Coach Danny Hurley from Rhode Island, his father, a 28-time state champion in Jersey City, New Jersey. He is now the president and also the basketball coach. He's the president of the school and the basketball coach. And unfortunately, this year, because of a lack of funds, because of a low population, they're going to have to close their doors. And what an unfortunate way for a coach like Bob Hurley to go out, having to actually have somebody slam the doors in his face rather than being able to go out on his own.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sad situation for any school at any level to shut its doors, because not only is it closing the door on Bob Hurley here, it's closing the door on the 160 students that currently go to the school that have to find a new school to be successful, and that's just outside the basketball team.
Yeah.
And so just at any level, closing a school is not fun, and it should start opening some eyes to people. Maybe because of St. Anthony having this kind of prominence that it has with the basketball team kind of shows some people that, hey, schools are actually closing. Now, this one's privately funded, and that was kind of part of the downfall of themselves. But still, they were able to do it before. They won, 28 state championships in basketball, more than any other school by far. And they don't have nowhere to hang the banners anymore.
Right. And the documentary is called The Street Stops Here. If you ever get a chance to YouTube it or to watch it, I believe it was on PBS at one point. It's a great documentary. It documents his Bob Hurley's coaching prowess, his style, his old school mentality. He'll remind you a lot of Bobby Knight. Except he doesn't throw a chair. Well, maybe he throws a chair or two, but he doesn't hit kids. So
he wasn't famous for throwing.
He wasn't famous for throwing chairs, but man, he is hard nosed. His kids play for him. He's had several NBA talented kids come through, including his own kids, and just an unfortunate way to end that. Looking at our Facebook comments, Travis said, "Rules are rules. How about Patrick Ewing taking the job, knowing that his son was out of a job? If he took it, thanks a lot, Dad." So yeah, it's true. I mean, Patrick Ewing did know. Maybe he did have a chance to talk with his. Maybe he did have a chance to talk with his son about it and say, "Is this okay if I do this? I know you're going to be out of a job, but is it cool?" And maybe he got his blessing from his son, but still, he was talking about it with ESPN, like, yeah, now we're going to have to find him another job, and like it was a surprise almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think the head coaching job kind of takes
precedent. Yeah,
it takes priority there. I think if I was in an assistant role and my dad said I have an opportunity that I've never had before to have this head coaching position at my alma mater that I pretty much put on the map.
Right.
I would allow him to take. I mean, it's not that I can not allow him to take it, but I'd
Dad, you
understand.
better not take it. I need my job.
I'd understand.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to talk about. But Patrick Ewing, we wish you the best of luck, and hopefully next season we'll be talking about you more and more as the Big East season goes on. But speaking of seasons going on, our season is not going to go on anymore here at College Road Trip. We are putting the show on hiatus. And for those of you that don't know the definition of hiatus, look it up. It basically means we're going to be going away until probably about mid-August when college football really starts to ramp. Really starts to ramp up.
We can only talk
again.
About satellite camps for so long over this.
Yeah, you can only talk about Jim Harbaugh's khakis, for a couple days, and then it gets kind of old.
Sleeping over at recruit's house.
Yeah. And we could talk about college baseball and college softball, but we choose to move on. We're going to come back in mid-August with College Road Trip, and we are going to make sure that you get all the ins and outs of college football, and we're going to have some great guests and some great opportunities to talk to our insiders once again about the NCAA and college sports. But for the time being, we're not going away. We're going to be coming back at you on Mondays. We're going to switch our time slots. We're no longer going to be on Wednesdays. We're going to be on Mondays. And it's going to be a show called Inside the Park, and we're going to talk about Major League Baseball. We don't have a Major League Baseball show here on the network, but now we do. Ryan, I know you are excited because you are a huge baseball fan. So we're going to be able to talk about that. We're going to have some great correspondence, some interesting guests. We already have some. Some feelers out there for some nationally syndicated guests and trying to get those guys on here. A chance to talk about everything regarding Major League Baseball, and I know people here in Milwaukee want to talk about it. People all over the nation want to talk about it, and we hope that we get an opportunity to bring you all that information and to bring you that stuff from a different perspective.
Yeah. I know people in Milwaukee really want to talk about it now here in April. We'll see how much they want to talk about it in July, August, but we're going to ride with what we have now. Baseball season is back. It's April. It's one of my favorite times of the year. We get to see the stars come out again. Get to relax at the ballpark. Just take it all in. I went to the Brewers game last night and just sat there and just enjoyed every second.
I actually
of it.
looked for you on TV. I couldn't find you though.
Nope, not at that time. I'll let you know if I ever do get the opportunity to go on TV during a game. That is the ultimate goal, but.
If you are in Milwaukee, though,
yeah.
you can see Ryan at the ballpark, though, some days, because what are you?
I'm on the grounds crew.
He's on the grounds crew at Miller Park. How awesome is that? That's
pretty fun.
You talk about getting inside information and getting right on the field. You're literally right on the field.
I still want to have a job, though. There's rules against that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to talk about Major League Baseball, not only from a local level, but also on a national level, talking about the different divisions, the American League, the National League. We're excited about it. We're going to be on from 5 to 6 every single Monday from now until we're hoping till the end of baseball season.
It's a great day too. We get to recap what happened the previous week over the weekend, and then preview the week coming up, and it's just kind of that same cycle that we're going to have going on.
Yeah, and a lot of big weekend series that end like a Yankees Red Sox or a Cardinals Cubs that end on a Sunday night. We get to talk about it right away on Monday evening, and we get to preview upcoming events like Ryan said. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. We invite you to join us, to comment on our Facebook page, comment on our Facebook Live as we bring you all that information on Monday nights starting from 5 to 6. It's going to be called Inside the Park. So that's going to do it for College Road Trip. We had fun. We enjoyed it. We can't wait till college football rolls around, but until then, it's baseball season. And until Monday night, for Ryan Thies, for our producer and engineers, David Bobke and Baxter Colburn, I'm Barry Nelson saying so long. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you Monday night for Inside the Park.